Janitor Luis Ramirez in Chicago stole $9 million from the Latin kings and was never seen again. For 7 years, he had mopped floors, emptied trash bins and scrubbed toilets in buildings controlled by the Latin kings, never asking questions, never looking where he shouldn't. His silence had earned him trust, or at least indifference, which in this world amounted to the same thing. The October wind rattled the windows as Luis worked his way through the back offices. His daughter Maria's medical bills sat heavy in his jacket pocket, crumpled reminders of a system that demanded payment for her leukemia treatment, while his insurance covered almost nothing. 3 jobs barely kept their heads above water, and still the collectors called. He was drowning slowly, and nobody was throwing him a line. If you're watching this, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're from. Now, let's continue with Luis's story. It was pure accident that he discovered the room. A water leak had forced him to check the basement storage area, a place he'd never been asked to clean. Behind a false panel beneath the stairs, he found it, a space no bigger than a closet, lined with metal shelves. Stacks of cash, rubber-banded and organized, filled every surface. His hands trembled as he picked up one bundle. Hundreds, all hundreds. He did quick math in his head, his heart hammering. Millions, had to be millions. Luis closed the panel and finished his shift in a daze. He went home to their small apartment in Pilsen, where Maria slept fitfully on the couch, too weak to make it to her bedroom. His wife Rosa looked up from her sewing, extra work she took in to help with bills, and her face creased with concern at his expression. "Que pasó?" she asked. "Nothing," he lied. "Long day." But it wasn't nothing. For 3 weeks Luis watched and learned. He tracked who came and went from the social club, memorized their schedules, noted when the buildings sat empty. The Latin kings stored their money there between Friday night collections and Monday morning counting, a temporary holding spot before it moved elsewhere. Security was light because the location was supposed to be secret. They relied on fear and reputation more than cameras and guards. Luis knew what he was considering was suicide. The Latin kings didn't forgive theft. They made examples of people. Bodies turned up in dumpsters, in the Chicago River, in vacant lots. Stealing from them meant death, not just for him, but potentially for Rosa and Maria too. Yet Maria's oncologist had been clear. Without the next round of treatment, she had maybe 6 months. With treatment, she might live. The cost? $200,000 that their insurance refused to cover, calling it experimental. $200,000 he would never have working as a janitor. But $9 million, that could save his daughter, that could save them all. The plan formed slowly, methodically. Luis wasn't an educated man, but he was careful and observant. He knew the social club's layout better than most of the gang members who used it. He knew the alarm code, had watched Hector, one of the enforcers, punch it in dozens of times. He knew which floorboard creaked, which door didn't lock properly, which window faced the alley where nobody looked. He would need help. His cousin Miguel worked at a document forgery shop in Little Village, creating fake IDs and papers for immigrants. Luis approached him carefully at a family gathering in early November, speaking in hypotheticals, testing the waters. "What would someone need to disappear completely?" Luis asked as they stood outside Miguel's garage, away from listening ears. Miguel lit a cigarette, studying his cousin's face. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." Curiosity about disappearing usually means trouble. Miguel blew smoke into the cold air. New identity costs money. Good ones cost more. Documents, birth certificates, social security cards, driver's licenses. A complete package runs about $30,000 for a family of 3. Luis nodded slowly. And if someone had that money? Miguel's eyes narrowed. Then they'd need to never come back to Chicago, never contact anyone from their old life. Become someone else completely. He paused. "Luis, whatever you're thinking—" "I'm not thinking anything," Luis interrupted. "Just asking." But he was thinking everything. He calculated constantly the weight of the money, how to transport it, where to hide it initially, how to move it without triggering bank alerts. He researched in the public library during his lunch breaks, learning about money laundering laws, cash transaction reporting limits, places where Americans could disappear. He chose the Friday before Thanksgiving. The social club would be packed Thursday night for their holiday celebration, meaning maximum cash flow. By Friday afternoon, the money would be stored in the basement, waiting for Monday's pickup. The Latin Kings would be relaxed, full of turkey and beer, many of them visiting family. The window of vulnerability would be small but real. Luis bought a used van with cash, registered to a fake name Miguel provided. He parked it in the alley behind the social club at 2 a.m. that Friday, when Chicago's streets were at their emptiest. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees, frost coating everything, the wind cutting through his jacket as he approached the back entrance. His hands shook as he punched in the alarm code. For a moment nothing happened, and panic seized his chest. Then the light blinked green. He was in. The building felt different in the darkness, more alive somehow, as if the walls themselves were watching. Luis moved through the familiar corridors with his flashlight, each step carefully placed. The basement stairs creaked. He'd oiled them during his last shift, but one still groaned under his weight. The panel opened smoothly. There it was, exactly as before, but more of it. They'd added to the stash for the holiday. Luis stared at the mountain of cash, his mind briefly going blank. This was it. The point of no return. He began loading duffel bags he'd brought, working quickly but methodically. The bills smelled like old paper and chemicals, like ink and hands and countless transactions. Each bundle represented someone's suffering. Drug money, extortion, protection rackets. He felt no guilt taking it. These weren't honest earnings. 20 minutes later, 6 duffel bags sat loaded in his van. He'd taken everything except the bottom layer on each shelf, enough so the theft wouldn't be immediately visible, but obvious once anyone looked closely. Luis locked up, reset the alarm, and drove away slowly, forcing himself not to speed, not to attract attention. At the storage unit he'd rented under his fake identity, Luis transferred the bags from the van to his own car, then abandoned the van in a shopping center parking lot on the south side. By sunrise, he was home, the money hidden in vacuum-sealed bags inside their walls, a temporary solution until they could leave. Rosa woke to find him sitting at their kitchen table, drinking coffee, staring at nothing. "Luis, you look terrible. Are you sick?" "We're leaving Chicago," he said quietly. "Today." Her face went pale. "What? Why? What happened?" "I got us money for Maria's treatment. A lot of money. But we have to go right now. Wake her up. Pack 1 bag each. Only what we can't live without." "Luis, what did you do?" He met her eyes. "I saved our daughter. That's all you need to know." Rosa stood frozen for a long moment, reading the truth in his face. Then she nodded and went to wake Maria. They understood each other after 28 years of marriage. She knew he would never put them in danger without reason. If he said they had to go, they had to go. By noon, they were on I-80 heading west, Luis's car loaded with their lives. Maria slept in the back seat, confused but too weak to protest much. Rosa sat rigid beside him, occasionally glancing in the side mirror as if expecting pursuit. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Albuquerque first. Then we'll see." "And the money?" "Hidden in the car. $9 million. Rosa's breath caught. "Dios mío. Luis, whose money?" "The Latin Kings." The car swerved slightly before Luis corrected. Rosa covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with terror. "They'll kill us," she whispered. "Only if they find us. Miguel is creating new identities. We'll be different people. Maria can get her treatment in New Mexico. Then we'll move again, maybe Arizona or Colorado. We'll keep moving until we're sure we're safe. And if we're never sure? Luis didn't answer because there was no good answer. He'd traded one death sentence, Maria's, for another that might catch them all. But at least now they had a chance. Behind them, Chicago disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead stretched America's vast interior, full of places to hide and reinvent themselves. Luis pressed the accelerator, watching the speedometer, keeping exactly at the limit. Everything depended on not being noticed, not standing out, becoming invisible again. In his pocket, Maria's medical bills were joined by new documents, birth certificates and social security cards bearing unfamiliar names. Luis Ramirez was dying on this highway, and someone else was being born, someone who would protect his family no matter the cost. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds as they crossed into Iowa, casting long shadows across frozen fields. Maria stirred awake, coughing weakly. "Papa, where are we?" "Going somewhere better, mija," Luis said softly. "Somewhere you can get well." "Will we come back home?" Luis exchanged glances with Rosa. "We're going to find a new home, an adventure." Maria settled back into sleep, accepting this, as children do. Rosa reached over and squeezed Luis's hand. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said. "So do I." The shelves that should have been packed with cash looked sparse. He stepped closer, his stomach dropping. The top layer of bills was gone from every stack. He began pulling out bundles frantically, counting, recounting, his hands shaking with rising panic. "Carlos," he said quietly, "get everyone here, right now." Within an hour, the social club filled with Latin Kings members. The atmosphere was tense and dangerous. Money had gone missing before, skimming, miscounts, but never like this. Someone had stolen millions. Jesus Morales, the leader of this faction, was a man who'd climbed through the ranks by being smarter and more ruthless than anyone else. He listened to Hector's report with an expressionless face that somehow conveyed more threat than any display of anger. "How much?" Jesus asked. 9 million, maybe more. I need to do a full accounting." Who had access? The usual crew, plus the janitor. The janitor? Jesus raised an eyebrow. The old man? Luis? He cleans here every night, has the alarm code. And where is Luis today? Hector made calls. Luis hadn't shown up for his shifts at any of his jobs. His apartment in Pilsen was empty. Neighbors said the family left over the weekend with luggage. His phone went straight to voicemail. Jesus smiled, but it was the smile of a predator. Find him. Find his family. Find anyone who knows anything. Offer a $100,000 reward for information. Luis Ramirez doesn't get to steal from us and disappear. The manhunt began immediately. The Latin Kings had connections throughout Chicago's Latino community, in police departments, in government offices. They put the word out. Luis Ramirez was a dead man walking, and anyone helping him would join him. But Luis had a head start and 9 million reasons to stay hidden. The race was on. The hunter and the hunted, played out across America's highways and small towns, a game of survival where the stakes were life and death. Jesus sat in the social club long after everyone left thinking, $9 million was a lot of money, but more than that, it was about respect, about the message. If Luis got away with this theft, every small-time criminal would think they could try the same thing. The Latin King's reputation was built on fear and inevitability. Cross them, and punishment was certain. He would find Luis Ramirez. It might take months or years, but he would find him. And when he did, Luis would learn that some debts could never be outrun. In Albuquerque, Luis checked them into a cheap motel using their new names, Thomas Rivera, his wife Elena, and daughter Carmen. Maria needed rest before they could take her to the hospital. She'd grown weaker during the drive, her skin taking on a grayish pallor that terrified Luis. That night, while his family slept, Luis sat in the parking lot and counted out $200,000 from one of the duffel bags. The bills felt like both salvation and damnation in his hands. This money would save Maria, but it had also made them fugitives. He thought about the life he'd left behind, his job, his apartment, his friends, his church. All of it gone in one desperate act. They could never go back. Maria would grow up without knowing her grandparents, her cousins, her neighborhood. Rosa would never see her sisters again. They traded everything familiar for survival. But as Luis watched his daughter sleep through the motel room window, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, he knew he'd make the same choice again. Family was everything. Without Maria, nothing else mattered. The next morning, Luis took Maria to the University of New Mexico hospital under their new identity. The oncologist was cautious but optimistic. The treatment she needed was available here, and with cash payment up front, they could start immediately. "You're lucky you came when you did," the doctor said. "Another few weeks, and it might have been too late." Lucky, Luis almost laughed. Luck had nothing to do with it. Desperation, crime, and a willingness to risk everything. That's what had brought them here. Maria began treatment the following week. Rosa found work at a laundromat under the table, paying in cash. Luis took a job at a restaurant as a dishwasher, keeping his head down, speaking to no one more than necessary. They rented a small house in the South Valley, paid 6 months up front in cash, and slowly began building a new life. But Luis couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every car that lingered too long made his heart race. Every stranger who looked twice made him consider running again. The Latin Kings had long memories and deep pockets. He knew they were looking. He bought a gun, a 9mm handgun from a private seller, no background check required. He kept it loaded in the nightstand, practiced at a shooting range outside the city. If they found him, he wouldn't go quietly. Months passed. Winter turned to spring in New Mexico, the desert blooming briefly before the summer heat arrived. Maria responded well to treatment, her strength returning slowly but steadily. Color came back to her cheeks. She started eating again. The doctors were encouraged. Rosa began to relax, to believe maybe they'd actually escaped. She made friends with neighbors, careful never to reveal too much about their past. Luis remained vigilant, always expecting the knock on the door, the faces from Chicago appearing in the crowd. In June, Miguel called Luis's burner phone, a violation of their agreement, but Miguel sounded panicked. "They came to my shop," Miguel said. "The Latin Kings. They know I helped you. I didn't tell them anything, but Luis, they're offering 100,000 for information. Someone will talk eventually. Are you safe? I'm leaving town, going to Mexico for a while. But you need to know, they're not stopping. Jesus has made it personal. He's told everyone you're an example that needs to be made." Luis felt ice in his stomach. "Thanks for the warning. Luis, was it worth it?" He looked through the window at Maria playing in the yard, laughing at something on her phone, looking like a normal teenager again instead of a dying child. "Yeah," Luis said quietly. "It was worth it." He hung up and immediately began planning their next move. Albuquerque was compromised. They needed to leave again, establish another identity, move to another city. The cycle would never end. They would be running forever. That night, Luis told Rosa they were leaving. She didn't cry or protest. She'd known this moment would come. They'd been living in borrowed time, pretending normalcy while looking over their shoulders. "Where this time?" Rosa asked. "Phoenix. Maria's treatment can continue there. After she's done, maybe Colorado or Oregon, somewhere far from the Southwest." "Will we ever stop running?" "I don't know." They packed again, taking only essentials. The remaining money, now about 8. 6 million after medical bills and living expenses was divided and hidden in various places, vacuum sealed in the car's panels, in banks under different names, in a storage unit in Santa Fe. Luis had learned to spread risk, to never keep all their resources in one place. Phoenix was hotter and bigger than Albuquerque. They rented in a working-class neighborhood called Maryvale, where questions weren't asked and cash was king. Luis took another restaurant job. Rosa worked at a dollar store. Maria continued her treatment at Banner Medical Center, but the paranoia never left. Luis started drinking to sleep, vodka straight from the bottle after his shifts. He lost weight, grew jumpy, snapped at Rosa over small things. The stress of constant vigilance was destroying him slowly. "You're killing yourself," Rosa said one night after he'd had too much. "Luis, maybe we should what? Turn ourselves in, give the money back? They'd kill us anyway. We could go to the police." "Witness protection." Luis laughed bitterly. "The Latin kings have people in the police. We'd be dead in a week. Then what? We run forever? Maria is almost done with treatment. She'll be healthy, but will never have a normal life. She'll never go to college, never have a real identity, never... She'll be alive," Luis shouted. "That's what matters." Maria appeared in the doorway, thin but recovering, her eyes sad and knowing beyond her 16 years. "Papa," she said quietly. "Mama, please don't fight." They both fell silent, ashamed. This wasn't the life they wanted for her, hiding, running, afraid, but it was the life they had. Over the next year, a routine emerged. Maria finished her treatment successfully. The cancer went into remission. She couldn't attend regular school, so Rosa homeschooled her using online programs. She made no friends her own age, had no social media, existed in a bubble of safety that was also a prison. Luis switched jobs frequently, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. He grew a beard, dyed his hair, wore glasses he didn't need. The man he'd been in Chicago slowly disappeared, replaced by this hollow-eyed stranger who jumped at shadows. In year 2 of their exile, Rosa found a lump in her breast. The diagnosis came back positive: stage 2 breast cancer. The cruel irony wasn't lost on any of them. They'd saved Maria only to face losing Rosa, but they had money. Rosa received the best treatment, the best doctors. Luis spent, without hesitation, hundreds of thousands for chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. Money that was supposed to last them a lifetime disappeared into medical bills. During Rosa's treatment, Luis took Maria to Colorado Springs. Rosa needed to focus on recovery, and the change of scenery might help Maria, who'd grown depressed and isolated. They drove through mountains that reminded Luis of paintings he'd seen, unreal in their beauty, so different from Chicago's flat urban landscape. "Papa," Maria said as they stopped at a viewpoint, "do you regret it? Taking the money?" Luis considered lying, then decided she deserved truth. Every day, and never. Both at the same time. "That doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't. But that's how I feel. I regret the fear, the running, what it's done to our family. But I don't regret that you're alive. I don't regret that Mama is getting treatment. Sometimes good things come from bad choices, and you just have to live with that. The people you stole from, they're still looking for us, aren't they?" "Yes." "Will they ever stop?" "Probably not." Maria nodded slowly. "Then we'll keep running. As long as we're together, we can handle it." Luis hugged his daughter, this brave young woman who'd faced death and exile with more grace than he ever could. Whatever else happened, he'd given her life. That had to count for something. Rosa recovered from her cancer treatment over the following months. The bills had been astronomical, but she was alive, declared cancer-free. They'd now spent nearly $3 million of the original $9 million. But Luis didn't care. His family was healthy, together, alive. They moved to Boise, Idaho, a place so far from Chicago's Latino community that the Latin King's reach seemed less threatening. Luis found work at a hotel, Rosa at a bakery. Maria enrolled in community college under her assumed identity, studying nursing. She wanted to help people the way doctors had helped her. Life took on a strange normalcy. Years passed. 3 years became 4, then 5. The acute fear faded into a dull background anxiety. Luis still carried his gun, still checked over his shoulder, but the panic attacks became less frequent. In year 6, Miguel called again. Luis, Jesus Morales got arrested. Federal charges, RICO, drug trafficking, murder. He's going away for life. Luis felt something break loose in his chest, relief so profound he had to sit down. You're sure? Positive. It's all over the news in Chicago. The feds took down half the Latin King's leadership. They're scattered, fighting amongst themselves. Nobody's thinking about you anymore. After he hung up, Luis told Rosa. She cried, not from sadness, but from release. The weight they'd carried for 6 years suddenly lifted. They weren't free, not entirely, but the immediate threat had diminished. Maybe we can stop running, Rosa said. Stay here. Let Maria have a normal life. Maybe, Luis agreed. That night, for the first time in 6 years, Luis slept without nightmares. They stayed in Boise. Maria graduated from community college and got a job at a local hospital as a nurse's aide. Rosa became a manager at the bakery. Luis was promoted to hotel night manager. They bought a small house, the first property they'd owned since Chicago. They planted a garden, made friends, attended a church. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt lives that felt real instead of borrowed. The money still sat hidden, insurance against catastrophe. Luis had invested some of it carefully through intermediaries, creating modest, legitimate income streams. They would never be rich by Boise standards, but they were comfortable. Years 7 and 8 passed quietly. Maria fell in love with a paramedic named Daniel. They announced their engagement. Rosa planned a small wedding. Luis walked his daughter down the aisle, using the name Thomas Rivera, and felt both joy and sadness. Joy for her happiness, sadness that none of their Chicago family could attend. In year 9, Luis was working the hotel night desk when a man checked in who made his blood run cold. The face was older, harder, but unmistakable. Pablo Sandoval, one of Jesus's top enforcers. Luis kept his expression neutral as he processed the check-in, his mind racing. Coincidence? Or had they finally found him? That night, Luis didn't go home. He watched from his car as Pablo left the hotel at 2 a.m. and drove through Boise's empty streets, stopping outside Luis's house. Pablo sat there for 20 minutes, just watching. Luis called Rosa from a burner phone. Pack a bag. Get Maria. Leave right now. Don't ask questions. Luis, what? Now, Rosa. Please. He watched from 3 blocks away as Rosa and Maria left through the back door and drove away in Maria's car. 30 minutes later, Pablo knocked on their front door. When no one answered, he kicked it in. Luis made a decision. He drove back to the hotel, retrieved his gun from the office safe, and waited in the parking lot. When Pablo returned at dawn, Luis approached his car. Pablo Sandoval, Luis said, gun pointed through the window. Pablo looked at him with recognition and something like respect. Luis Ramirez, you're harder to find than I expected. Jesus is in prison. Why come after me now? He's not in prison anymore. Medical release last month. Cancer. He's dying, wanted to settle old scores before the end. Sent me to find you. Pablo studied Luis's gun. So what now? You going to shoot me? If I have to. And then what? Run again? You're tired, Luis. I can see it. 9 years of running, and you're done. Luis's hand shook slightly. Pablo was right. He was tired. Bone tired. Tired of fear, of hiding, of half-living. Tell Jesus I'll give back what's left, Luis said. 6 million. He can have it all. Just leave my family alone. Pablo shook his head. It's not about the money anymore, it's about the principle. You stole from the Latin kings. That debt doesn't get paid with money. Then we're at an impasse. Pablo smiled grimly. Seems like. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Pablo spoke again. Jesus is dying in 3 months, maybe less. After he's gone, nobody cares about you. This vendetta dies with him. You're nobody, a janitor who got lucky. Without Jesus pushing, the Latin kings have moved on. So why are you here? Because he's dying, and I owe him. But Luis, I'm going to go back and tell him I couldn't find you. That the trail went cold in Phoenix years ago. I'm going to let him die believing you got away. Pablo paused. My daughter had cancer too. Survived because we could afford treatment. I understand what you did, even if I can't forgive it. So I'm giving you a gift. 3 months. Stay hidden until Jesus is gone. Then you're free. Luis lowered the gun slightly. Why? Because I'm tired too. Tired of all the killing, all the revenge. Jesus is the last of the old guard. After him, things change. We're businessmen now, not soldiers. There's no profit in chasing ghosts. Pablo started his car. Goodbye, Luis Ramirez. Don't make me regret this. He drove away, leaving Luis standing alone in the parking lot as the sun rose over Idaho. Luis reunited with Rosa and Maria at a motel outside the city. He told them everything. Pablo's visit, Jesus' impending death, the 3-month countdown. They held each other and cried, releasing 9 years of accumulated fear and stress. They stayed away from Boise for 4 months, just to be safe. When they finally returned, Luis checked news sources obsessively until he found it, a small obituary in a Chicago paper. Jesus Morales, dead at 52 from pancreatic cancer. The threat was over. After 9 years, they were finally safe. But freedom felt strange. Luis waited for the relief, the joy, the sense of new beginning. Instead, he felt hollow. He'd spent so long defined by fear and running that peace felt foreign, uncomfortable. Over the following months, Luis struggled with depression and guilt. He'd saved his family, but destroyed the man he'd been. The money sat in accounts and storage, meaningless now except as a reminder of what he'd sacrificed. Maria thrived, married, working as an RN, talking about having children. Rosa rebuilt her social life, joined clubs, made genuine friends. They were healing, but Luis remained stuck, unable to move forward or back. One night, Luis drove to a park and sat alone, thinking about the $9 million. He'd spent about $3 million on medical bills and living expenses. $6 million remained, hidden away, tainted by its origins. He thought about the people that money had come from, drug addicts, business owners forced to pay protection, communities destroyed by gang violence. The money represented suffering, and while he'd used some of it for good, it was still blood money. Luis made a decision. Over the next year, he anonymously donated most of the remaining money to cancer research, immigrant legal aid funds, and violence prevention programs in Chicago. He kept enough to secure Maria's future, her education, a down payment on a house, a trust fund for her future children, the rest about $5 million he gave away. When Rosa found out, she was shocked. "Luis, that was our security." "No," he said. "That was our prison. Maria is healthy. You're healthy. We have jobs and a home. We don't need blood money. But I stole it to save Maria. She's saved. The debt is paid. Keeping the rest would just poison us." Rosa understood, even if she didn't fully agree. She hugged her husband, this complicated man who'd committed a terrible crime for the best reasons. In year 10, Luis turned 63. He looked older than his years, grey and weathered by stress and guilt. Maria threw him a birthday party, inviting friends and neighbors who knew him as Thomas Rivera, the quiet hotel manager who kept to himself. As Luis watched his daughter laugh with her husband, watched Rosa chat with friends, he felt something shift inside him. Not happiness exactly, but acceptance. He would never be Luis Ramirez again. That man died in Chicago a decade ago. Thomas Rivera was who he was now, a man who'd done a terrible thing that led to necessary consequences, who'd saved his family by destroying himself, who'd run until running was all he knew. But Maria was alive. That's what mattered. The cost had been high, his identity, his peace, years of fear, but she was alive and healthy and happy. That night, Luis sat on his porch and looked at Idaho's stars, so different from Chicago's light-polluted sky. He thought about the janitor he'd been, invisible and powerless, and the fugitive he'd become. Neither identity felt real anymore. He existed in the space between, a man defined by one desperate act and its endless aftermath. Somewhere in Chicago, the Latin Kings still operated, though diminished and transformed. The money Luis had stolen was forgotten, written off, barely a footnote in their history. They'd moved on. But Luis Ramirez couldn't move on because Luis Ramirez didn't exist anymore. He'd vanished that November night in 2016, taking $9 million and leaving behind everything he'd been. In his place stood Thomas Rivera, a man haunted by ghosts of his own creation, living a life built on crime and justified by love. Was it worth it? That question tormented Luis until the day he died, 20 years after the theft, at age 73. He passed quietly in his sleep, Rosa beside him, Maria and her 3 children in the next room. At his funeral, friends from Boise remembered Thomas Rivera as a kind man, quiet and sad sometimes, but devoted to his family. They knew nothing of Luis Ramirez, nothing of the theft, nothing of the 9 years of running. Maria stood at his grave and cried for the father who'd saved her life and lost his own in the process. She understood now what he'd sacrificed, not just identity and home, but peace and self-forgiveness. He'd lived 30 years as a fugitive in his own mind, even after the external threat ended. On his headstone, she'd had carved, "Thomas Rivera, beloved husband and father. He gave everything for family." It was both truth and lie, like everything about the man who stole $9 million and disappeared. Luis Ramirez died in Chicago. Thomas Rivera died in Boise. And the space between them, where the real man existed, remained unknowable and unreachable even to those who loved him most. The Latin Kings never found him. The money saved 2 lives but couldn't save the man who stole it. And somewhere in America's vast middle, in storage units and bank accounts, the last remnants of $9 million sat forgotten. Blood money cleansed through sacrifice and suffering, transformed from gang profits to cancer treatment, to charity donations, to Maria's children's college funds. A slow alchemy of redemption that Luis himself never believed in. He'd asked once, near the end, if it was worth it. Maria had been visiting, her oldest daughter playing in the yard. "Look at her," Maria said. "Your granddaughter. She exists because you stole that money. I exist because you stole that money. Mama is alive because of it, so yes, Papa, it was worth it. Whatever it cost you, whatever guilt you carry, it was worth it." Luis had nodded, but hadn't been convinced. Guilt was his companion until the end, inseparable and unforgiving. The story of Janitor Luis Ramirez, who stole $9 million from the Latin Kings and was never seen again, ended not with capture or violence, but with quiet domestic tragedy. A man who saved his family and lost himself, who disappeared not because he was found, but because he chose to vanish, carrying his crime and his justification to a grave marked with someone else's name.